Sharish Bhatia. Peggy Briggs.
Here.
Brian Conway.
Present.
Kathy Kupko.
Here.
Eric Dahlberg.
Here.
John Garofalo. Pat Geyer. Gerard Jansen. Don Kupka.
Here.
Lindsay List.
Here.
Carlin Reed.
Present.
Paul Rodriguez.
Paul told me he wouldn't be making it.
Okay. Quasi Shadruzaman. Shri Tupol. Lois Wassoff.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
So why don't we begin by going through the agenda? The first thing we'll do is open it up for public comment, and I'll remind everyone that public comment is limited to a total of 10 minutes with no more than 2 minutes allocated to any one speaker. And it's also limited to the items that are not on the agenda. So do we have any hands raised? Anyone from the public who wants to bring anything to the attention of the Finance Committee at this meeting? Ryan, do you see anyone?
Just give me a minute. No one? Okay. Okay.
Nope. Zach,
Nope.
no? Okay, then we'll move on from public comment. There's no correspondence to review, so we'll move on from that. Our October 16th minutes will be reviewed at our November meeting along with the minutes of this meeting, October 30th. So we have no minutes to review, but we'll have 2 sets to review in November. So let's move on to the liaison report. And there were a few, it was short but important, a couple of interesting developments. Pat noted for the liaison report that the middle school project had come in under budget.
Yay.
So, yeah, that's very good news. It doesn't mean money back, but as was correctly pointed out in the Bridge article, it means that the full borrowing authorization won't be needed. So that is good news. Let me just I'm gonna skip over the land use report for a minute. I'm gonna ask Peggy, the CPC meeting was held on October 28th, so the report was prepared before the meeting was held. So Peggy, you were at?
Yeah, yes, I attended. It was on Zoom, but I attended. And mainly, it's just questions and answers. They're just going through the applications. They did spend an hour on the amenities building. And I think it was mostly, updates on construction costs and timing. There were, I actually fielded a couple of questions. One was, has the CPC ever funded such a bulk of their annual money to a single project in the past? And the answer is yes. They funded pretty much, I think it was $2 million for the turf fields, now known as the Doug Waite Fields, that year. So it's not unheard of to really devote a big chunk of the money to one project. I did convey to them, maybe getting over my skis tips a little bit, that the FinCom would certainly be quite interested if they did move to any kind of a bonding recommendation. And the chair immediately responded that that was in one email from one member. That's all. And there was no further discussion about that. I brought it up.
Okay,
So
that's interesting.
right now, that's it.
Okay. Kathy, again, I guess before we go to land use, is there anyone online or in the room who has any liaison updates who didn't provide them in writing? And I know there was only a 2-week gap between the meetings, so the answer could readily be no. And if you are online and you have a report, can you raise your hand? Otherwise, Ryan, any hands? Zach, any hands?
No hands.
Okay.
Suresh has joined me.
Oh, great. Hi, Suresh. Okay, so let's move on. Kathy provided a detailed report on what the land use working group has been doing. And if any of you have a spare hour or so, the first part of the select board meeting was Sven Weber's presentation to the select board on the land use, what the land use group is doing. So I commend that to you. But Kathy, you had some specific issues you wanted to raise.
Yes, thank you. So, again, the report was written prior to, I think it was just yesterday morning, or Tuesday morning. So basically, for those of you who are following along, there were 3 subcommittees working. The municipal consolidation, the public safety, and public works. So in order to get their arms around all of the land use and buildings, they're specializing in the subcommittees. And I would say each committee is at various stages in terms of, getting out of the gate and then getting into their work. And the municipal consolidation is the furthest along in that process. And I see we have our guest, Paul is here and is the
Select board.
creator of the spreadsheet that I wanted to talk about tonight. And they're working on analyzing the inventory of buildings and in order to sort of assess if we consolidate into these, the various permutations. And in that spreadsheet, I'm hopefully, I'm kind of tongue-tied because Paul is here and he could probably explain it better than I, but they have been valuing the buildings, and that's the toughest part, is to actually get a real estate value, but right now they're using the assessor's value for the properties. They're gathering from finance the operating costs of the building, and then projecting those operating costs out 10 years. Paul, one question is, is capital improvements included in that 10-year projection, or is it just operating costs? Then looking at, okay, so this is what it would be to keep these buildings. What about if we sold the building? What would happen? How much would we get for it? What additional revenue taxes would the town receive? And et cetera, in terms of trying to get their arms around the data, to create a data. At the last meeting, there was several discussions, very meaningful discussions. One I wanted to highlight is that in talking about these projections, you're starting with a baseline of today. And when you're going out this, 5-10 years, you're making a guess. You're adding inflation, but who knows what will happen in real estate values, taxation, operating costs. And also, not only that, if you're trying to look at this 10-year timeline, one of the co-chairs rightly pointed out that any change that the town decides to make in terms of either building something new, moving people, it's not going to happen in year 1. Mm-hmm. It's going to take a couple of years to get the final analysis and the approvals and the actual moves. So you start to look at this timeline, and there was a discussion of, well, should the timeline be 15 years?
30.
The subcommittee, as they discussed it, came and turned to me and said, would the Finance Committee have an opinion on this analysis? Now, I gave them my personal opinion at the time, and that was, I think anytime you go out 10 years, it's a wild guess. And to me, 15 years might even be meaningless. I don't know what the correct answer was, but I did tell them that I would bring it to the committee for us to discuss. And and even before we discussed that one specific issue, which we do owe them an answer, it brought to my mind, what should our role be as a finance committee in this whole, this is really a very special project. And I think, Lois, you and I have had this conversation about how far-reaching and impactful this project will be. The question I would put forward, and and perhaps we need to talk with
Moderator or
the moderator,
council.
is what is our charge? I mean, we spend all of our time on taxation. Yes, I did look it up. Our charge, we do have one item in our charter that talks about general operations and projects in the town. But I think this is something special. So I laid that out, two things, one specific in terms of projections of 10 or 15 years. Do we have an opinion? Do we want to take an opinion? And I think on a broad, just opens up a broad question as to, should we be looking at this? Do we wait till after things get sent to the select board and be asked? Or do we wait until something gets developed in a year or so that it's going to be on going to town meeting? So I'll stop there and open it up for discussion.
Should we have a discussion?
Yeah, we should have a discussion. I think that, Paul, if you want to jump in and either further explain what kind of feedback the land use working group was asking for from us specifically, that would be helpful.
Hi, Paul Bohm, Municipal Subgroup, Land Use Working Group. The only thing I'll add is just what we're going to come up with a set of recommendations that are based on clearly stated assumptions. We're not, and the best available information. Based on those recommendations, the select board will probably ask for more specific projections, a financial analysis. We are not doing the final financial analysis. We are doing the plausible recommendations. Does this make sense? Do the numbers kind of match? Is it in the ballpark? So I don't want to overpromise what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So I think whatever we do, it's going to see your eyes eventually in some planning. So I'm not terribly worried about doing the ultimate financial analysis now because we're not doing that. We're pulling together data. Mm-hmm. We're looking at buildings that can be vacated, buildings that can be moved into, mm-hmm. renovation costs related to those, opportunity costs related on the revenue side. Of course, the taxation numbers are based on current tax rates, whether they're going to be 10 years from now. So we're going to state all those assumptions. So I'm not terribly worried about getting this accurate, but the advice we need is sort of the projections, even with our assumptions. Do you want us to project out 10 years? For example, we're projecting out tax revenues with a sale of a building. Mm-hmm. Okay, those are significant. We're going to use the current tax rates, but should we project out 10 years or 15 years? What makes sense in terms of the financial comparisons? Because whatever recommendations we make in the other groups, they're not going to be fully completed for quite some time. So what is the time horizon you'd like us to kind of focus on? That's the question, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to open it up with that, further information. I'm going to open it up. Does anybody, Don?
Yeah, I would say, I've been involved in a few of these in my career, and it's, there's always this moment of uncertainty about, and so I guess my motto has always been, always have a plan and always be prepared to change it, A plan is not a script, but you always have to have the plan and know what you would do absent changes. And as long as the assumptions are the same across the board, so everybody can say, we're going to inflate the tax revenue at 2.5% because of Prop 2.5, and we're going to inflate the construction costs at 4% or something like that. And as long as everybody uses that same model, it's not going to really matter if the numbers are accurate or not. They're in the ballpark. And needs will change, everything is going to change. One thing about all of these plans is the only thing you know for sure when you're done is it's not going to come out just like that. Something along the way, there'll be some opportunity that arose that nobody anticipated, et cetera. So you always have to be prepared to change it. But I would encourage the town to have a 20-year plan and say, this is what we would do now from what we know. So we're thinking ahead about things like, not only the immediate needs, but the things that will be coming up. And I think what FinCom can do to contribute is to look at our debt schedule and think about the taxation capacity for this. And when we think, because of expiring debt, there becomes a window to take on debt and provide that as one lens to the committee to use to look at the timing, not to say that it's going to be what works from that perspective, but just that's one variable to add into your matrix.
Yeah, and putting on my land use working group hat, and not my select board hat, I think if you gave advice to the co-chairs,
Yeah.
Sven and Judith, because we want to have the same assumption across all of the working groups.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful. Then we just kind of drop it in there, what percentage,
Yeah.
inflation, et cetera, and we can apply that across the board. That would be very helpful.
I've watched a few of your meetings, and I have to say, we're so lucky to have a great and talented team of people here working on this, so it's going to be fine. It's going to be good.
So, anybody else, Lindsay, anyone? So what are the points that you see, and it's not to put you on the spot, you don't have to answer right away. What are the points where you see Finance Committee review, intervention, input, more than just having, as we do, a liaison who is attending the meetings and participating and being available, but what are the points in the process where you think we could add value?
Speaking for myself and not for either my subcommittee or the chairs, I think before any of these recommendations went to the select board, having put some eyes on those.
Okay.
So I'm not speaking for the co-chairs, and I'm not sure where that is in the timeline, but I think that would be helpful, because there's going to be a lot of numbers in these recommendations. There have to be.
And your time frame is you had a one-year charge, so,
Right, for this
First
phase. And the questions come up, well, what happens to the next phase? How does what we're doing on the municipal side relate to the land use for non-municipal purposes?
right,
We haven't really cracked that nut yet,
okay.
but just on the municipal side, so putting some eyes on the financial pieces of the recommendations would be helpful. That's all I can, my personal view.
And
So I think-
would you say it's, excuse me, one second, would you say it's also, it's also going to depend, I've heard the two groups speak, the land use and the select board, you're also going to be coordinating with MCI. So there's still a lot of uncertainty as to how the pieces are going to fit together.
Yeah, I've described this as not a puzzle, but a Tetris.
Yeah,
You know, where
Yeah.
the pieces keep moving and shifting.
Yeah, the analogies got really a little over the top. at the
Yeah, we
end.
had an analogy
There were
contest.
Jenga towers, and I was just,
Yeah.
it was very hard to watch. So,
Hey,
Peggy, you had something to say?
Yeah, I think this is really useful. First of all, I agree with Don, we should go to 20. I would even suggest 30. And I like the idea of having a number, one for inflation, one for tax rate increase, construction increase, interest rate, we don't know, but pick one and just flatline it. So if you change it, if it's wrong, you can change it. But it would be helpful from the committee and from the select board, Paul, to get a list of those parameters. And Lindsay has done a lot of great work, and Don, on our guidelines process for looking at inflation, looking at, future income growth, looking at different things, and finding sources of information at the state level, at the federal level. So I think it'd be I think it'd be a good role for us
Yeah.
to
Yep.
give some ideas, and then just flatline them out there. Go 30 years. I'd go 30, and I wouldn't even start for 5 years. So, start in 2030, go to 2055. We'll all be here.
From my observation, I think they have some of those basics already. They, in terms of 2.5% on taxes and
perfect.
inflation. Yes, we can give them more data. One item that came up yesterday that I thought was also interesting is if we sell property and it gets developed, trying to crystal ball what kind of development goes on it, because depending on what's built on it will depend on which tax rates we apply. So, I don't know if you
But
want-
that's what the committee can figure. That's their hunt, not ours. I
Well,
think ours is sort of
no,
more.
it's I think it's part of the financial picture of
Yeah.
what is your assumption? So it just needs to be defined as to
Yeah.
what is the assumption as to what use that land has.
Kathy, I think the committee is trying to avoid the expensive full appraisals, but that's one of the benefits is the appraiser identifies the highest and best use of the land. And that, then what the number would be based on that use, and it may not be the current zoning. And that's okay, because we can change the zoning. But it's important to go in with that highest and best use, and that's a standard industry practice.
Yeah,
within
can't they
real
just
estate
use
appraisal.
Zillow?
Well,
Get a Zestimate?
I think it's there's a whole,
I want, let the committee reflect, that was a little sarcasm.
I'm sorry, that was tongue in cheek.
okay, thanks.
Don, I think you're, highest and best use, but
Yeah.
it's not up to us. It's up to them
Oh,
to come
yes.
up with that highest and best use.
Well,
In my
that's what I
view.
said, an appraiser
And
would
then
do.
they can drop in the, taxable value, and we can give them the tax rate increase.
Yeah.
So we'll give them the parameters, but I don't think that's our hunt to come
No, I
up
meant it
with
as a
that.
case to use an appraiser, actually, to
Yeah.
get appraisal reports for these properties.
No,
Yeah.
And highest and best use is good information to have in terms of the value, but that's not necessarily the use these properties will be put to,
Correct.
because, the fact that it might make a good apartment building, if what we need is a fire station,
Yep,
then, what we as a community need overall will affect
Yeah.
what's the best use, even if it isn't the one that produces the highest value.
Of course.
No,
It's
no,
not
no.
to say that you have to
Oh,
do
no, I know
what's
you're not
highest and
arguing
best.
for that. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that that's what that
Yeah.
phrase means in
Yeah.
my understanding.
It's good, it's the opportunity cost then, which you take into consideration when you consider, should we put a fire station where we could have $100 million something?
Exactly.
Or not,
No,
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
that's right.
Madam Chair, you have two people who have their hands up, Carlin and a member of the public.
Okay, then
Would
let's
you like
go,
to go to first?
so let's start with Carlin.
Thanks, Lois. I think the FinCom has two additional roles that have not been discussed. One is when there's going to be an expenditure of funds, we're going to be asked our perspective on it. Can the town afford to spend X number of $1 million to purchase this land or develop it? So that will be one role that we will have in the future. The second role that we will have, I would suggest, is making sure we have funds available in a stabilization fund. allocating funds between, for now and every year until we're ready to use it, so that we have money available to do the kind of construction purchase that we need. So we can help save the funds, and we can help also by giving our observations on how the funds can be used.
You know,
That's it.
I completely agree with that. I think those are roles that finance committees in future days will definitely be playing or should be playing. I think this is such a complex process and involves so much forward thinking. It's a little different from where we usually get involved, and I think it's an interesting challenge for us to determine where we can make useful inputs into the planning process without creating another level of complication or
Right.
bureaucracy.
Right, just help, being
And,
helpful.
and then help guide the situation in an earlier stage. And then absolutely, what you're talking about is where this project is going and where some of our successors will be very actively involved. So it's a good point.
I think, Carlin, you make a good point, you know, in terms of stabilization funds. You know, maybe it's premature to have it being discussed at this year's committee. Maybe it's not. But
No, well, it's premature to discuss establishing special purpose stabilization funds for purposes that haven't been defined. But that's exactly the work that the Financial Policy Working Group is doing, is setting the parameters for that and creating the policies pursuant to which those funds will be created. So, you know, it's all on a continuum. It's just what Paul and his colleagues are dealing with seems particularly complicated. So, was there another hand up online?
From the public, yes, Linda Escobedo?
Linda?
Thank you. It's very difficult to hear, particularly Lois and Kathy's mic. You need to speak directly into the mic. And so far, the other people who have spoken have been heard, but that would be helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Linda. I'll be more careful. Thank you.
okay, I think that's it.
Okay, so I think, you know, this is something we will put on the agenda for our next meeting and that we will discuss further. And we will seek guidance from both the Select Board and the Land Use Planning Group about where we can intervene in a useful way. So, oh, and speaking of the Select Board, I have a very brief liaison report of my own, which is that I had reached out to Mark Howell by email, I don't know, a week or more ago, about the November 20th meeting. Our November 20th meeting is on the schedule as both a regular meeting and a public hearing on capital. And I had some questions about whether or not that was really about what we were trying to accomplish by having a public hearing then, in view of the fact that very shortly afterward, on December 8th, the Select Board is having a tri-board hearing on capital, which we will be participating in. And Mark replied by raising the issue with the Select Board. So my report to you is that our November 20th meeting is going to be a regular Finance Committee meeting. We can talk at the end of the meeting there's a number of agenda items. We have a lot of work to do. And there's a number of agenda items that will be on the agenda for November 20th, including the Minuteman presentation. And a few other things that we'll discuss. But we will not be having a public hearing on capital on November 20th. It'll be a regular meeting. So, the next item on the agenda is the report on the Financial Policy Working Group, which I'll give since Don has a lot to say later, and he and I are the two representatives on it. And the report is we're meeting, we're working, and we are starting to draft. So we have another meeting next week, and saying that out loud just reminded me that I better do some drafting over the weekend. So we are trying to get some of the concepts that we've been throwing around in our meetings down on paper and start to refine them. We are looking at a deadline imposed in our charter to get some preliminary information to the select board before the warrant closes, so that there's some, to the extent that anything we're doing might influence warrant articles that people are thinking about, we've made public what our current thinking is. We won't have policies ready for the select board to consider, but we've been making progress, and we'll have some information. So that's that report. And that brings us, only 10 minutes late, to Ryan's presentation, which is going to be our chance to see the status of the development work that the town is doing on the operating budget, and some of the town's responses to the information requests we had sent. So, Ryan?
Okay, just give me a minute here to pull up my presentation. So Lois, if you wouldn't mind, just to see if we can get this up here. Just a couple quick things. This is a small thing. I wanted to express my congratulations to Suresh, since as he goes off the screen. Suresh and I worked in Littleton on a school project. They just had their town meeting earlier, and I've been informed there's a successful vote, 826 to 60, Suresh. So congratulations. It's going to be going to the ballot this upcoming Saturday, as I understand. So on a personal side, so congratulations to you and the team in Littleton. It's a really nice thing. So congratulations.
Thank you, Ryan.
Sure. On a separate note, I wanted to let the Finance Committee know our new CFO begins on Monday, Jennifer Barrett. So Lindsay was on the interview team for that, and I've had the opportunity to work with Jennifer before, and I'm looking forward to teaming up with her again. And I think she's going to be a really great fit for our finance department, and be kind of really allow us to flesh out some more of the things that Zach and I have been working on to really make the finance department as strong as it can be. So it's a real step in the right direction, and so I'm very excited about that, and I look forward to introducing her to you at your next meeting. So with that said, let's start start off the presentation here. So let's see. It should be starting. There we go. Okay. And it's frozen. All right. Okay. So it was working. Here we go. Well, God bless technology, isn't it great? Okay. Just give me a minute here. Stop share. Okay.
See, Linda's hand is up. I don't know if it's back or still.
It is up. We can have, Linda's hand's back up, so do you mind if we're, Madam Chair?
Linda's hand is up. Do you want to let her talk?
Linda? Yeah. Are you having trouble hearing again?
Hold on. Can you let Linda speak? She can speak? Okay. Linda?
This is Carlin. I think Linda may be having some trouble hearing. Ryan, because his microphone is a little bit far away from
Okay.
his mouth.
Ryan,
All
I'm
right.
having trouble hearing you, and I'm in the room.
Okay, okay.
So
I will speak louder.
closer and louder.
All right, closer and louder, I can do that. Okay. All right, still having my issues here, so, okay. All right, let's see here. Okay, so, so for our update tonight, just want to start off with just reminding the Finance Committee of your upcoming calendar. November 17th is an important day because we establish a tax rate as a tax classification hearing with the Select Board. So that is forthcoming. Meeting after that is November 20th. That was the meeting I believe you were talking about. Is that our capital or so? The plan for that is again.
It'll be a regular meeting, and since I know one of the presentations at the November 17th Select Board meeting is going to be the town manager presenting the operating budget, prepare yourself for an invitation on November 20th. They can be the same slides, incorporating whatever input you've gotten from the Select Board if you have time, but I think we'd like to see that too as part of our meeting on November 20th. But
December 8th, so that's the tri-board meeting we talked about. December 11th is a regular meeting and discussing some more about the guidelines.
well, December 11th is the day that we will vote for the final guidelines.
Final guidelines, correct. And then in December, we're finalizing the capital and operating budgets. In March, we're going to have the public hearings for our capital and operating budgets. And then April 27th, 2026 is our annual town meeting. So just as a quick reminder for the Finance Committee, just, roles and responsibilities here. So Finance Committee is conducting public hearings and the budgets. We just talked about what that schedule will be. You're going to be providing an annual report to town meeting, which, of course, is something that's anticipated. We'll be working with you on getting that out. Of course, transfers from the reserve fund. That's the $200,000 that if we come to you at any point during the year and need transfers from, we can do that. And then the item that we have for today, which is establishing fiscal guidelines for the three major budgeting entities in the town, which is our operating budget, Concord Public Schools, and Concord Carlisle Regional School as well. So that's really kind of what we're here today to talk about. And then, as I understand, our objective would be to come out of this with preliminary guidelines to be able to provide to Concord Public Schools, Concord Carlisle Regional High School, and the town's general fund. As a recap on our CIP, what capital improvement plan per our financial policy. So we're supposed to be providing an update on a 5-year capital plan. Right now, we have a 10-year capital plan. So we've expanded that a little bit. Policy, I think, was last updated in 2018. So that might be something we'd work on when we look at that. This is something that Dawn shared recently, and sort of goals in terms of percentages of where we are and what we should be using in our budget. So overall, we should be targeting 7 to 8% of the excluded debt levy for capital financing, and no more than 5% of the debt service is within the levy limit. So separately, capital outlay from town departments and public schools should be at least 2 to 3% of the annual budget. So that's part of what that range would be that we would present to you. That'll be somewhere between 2 and 3%, consistent with our financial policy. So just as an overview here, on September 25th, we presented to you the as-submitted capital improvement plan. That was the unvarnished version with basically every single thing that was asked for in that capital plan. It's just kind of how the timing was, that we just wanted to, we hadn't vetted any of that. Since that time, most of the departmental capital requests have been reviewed with the department heads, with Zach, myself, and the town manager. So we're continuing that process, and it is still a work in progress. In fact, we have another meeting tomorrow with our enterprise funds for water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. So it's going to be here in this meeting, and that'll conclude all of our budget meetings and budget reviews that we are doing and conducting on that front. So again, that is still a work in progress. So at your last meeting on October 16th, Concord Public Schools presented a general sense of where they were at 3.5%. And Concord Carlisle, the Concord share of that assessment is actually going down 0.9%. So that's kind of where we stand. And as I pointed out to you earlier, we're still in the process of vetting things out on both capital and operating budgets. So as a reminder, some of the things that we've talked about that are in the current proposed budget that we're reviewing, there's some personnel requests. First is an update to the police command structure to look into the police chief, getting him a deputy chief. Right now, you know, if you compare that to what's going on in the fire department, there is, I think it's a deputy chief and an assistant chief, Zach? Is that my getting that? Two assistants, okay. So a little bit of this is also equity, but it also, it does create a bit of an operational issue. When the chief is ever away for whatever reason, that the operating structure, the highest ranking officer then is a captain who's available at that time, which does, it doesn't create problems, but something we would maybe like to change with this request, and have it something that's maybe not exactly like what's similar in the structure of the fire side, but something that at least recognizes some of the gap there on that side. Sticking with public safety, there's a proposal for a new business manager. Right now, there is a business manager on Concord Public Works, and they're looking to have someone who may be able to bring in a police, fire, and dispatch. As you remember, too, dispatch is being stood up on its own within the budget this year. So this business manager will be responsible for bringing all of those components together and dealing probably a lot with myself and the finance team as well. We also discussed a public records administrator. We're looking at the possibility of either a full-time position or a part-time position. When Carrie was here last time, she talked about some of the strains on staff as it relates to the volume of public records requests we're receiving. When those records requests come in, it has to be, vetted, it has to be coordinated, and it's something we take seriously. That's the law, and it's our obligation to the public. But there is also time associated with that. Right now, it's residing primarily with our archivist, and the archivist is doing a great job, but is spending a lot more time working on these public records requests than he'd like, and not working on the things that he actually was primarily hired for. So that may be something we'd be looking at. Another position, I want to highlight this. This is a new item, something that didn't come up in that last presentation, but it was something during our meetings that came up. This is a position that basically, previously there was an IT. Where's the mic? Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. Minuteman Media is looking for openings, Don. So I'm applying. There you go. Thank you. Appreciate that. So this is what the IT department's referring to as a business knowledge manager. So this is really trying to bring together some issues that plague a lot of the departments in town. One of the things that happens is that when we leave one software platform, we then have to figure out what to do when we move to the next platform and take that data with us, and what happens there. Other initiatives that come up, like when we're putting on 365, or if we're looking for other upgrades, what do we want to move toward? Strategically, it's something that is being requested by our new IT director. So the concept, what they had said, there was once, not in the FY26 budget, but in the FY25 budget, there was an IT business analyst that was vacant, and as part of the cuts in FY25, it was removed, and so it's going to continue to remain removed, but the idea that this is trying to bring back some of that capacity here. with, that was lost in that transition. We also, so other things to talk about personnel-wise, there were some other changes and cuts that were made into the FY26 budget. The seasonal ranger was one of those for natural resources. We're seeing a lot of pressure and is being reflected in the request from fire and police right now at this point for overtime. One of the things that they're seeing is in town where there's now regular protests and things that we have to staff. The police need to be there, but there isn't any funding source for that. It's just something that typically is that the police fund through overtime to ensure that there is a police presence at those events. We've also been discussing the fact that we'll be looking at a cost of living adjustment for our non-union employees. When in collective bargaining, when unions have engaged with the town, they are getting increases with that. We on the non-union side are on a scale, and with that scale, you go up each year by typically 2% if you are moving from one step to the next. But that a little bit of this is that hasn't been altered or hasn't been updated in a while, so there may be some thought about wanting to bring this up and look at some percentage basis on that. So it's another pressure point for us. So one other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention and ask for your consideration, when we look at the budget guidelines, there are some things that come up that are sort of quirky and aren't necessarily fit well within what we do on the operating budget. One of those things is the request from the town clerk's office in FY27. We are going up, we have 3 elections this year, which is increasing that budget by about $73,000. So we'll get the local election, the state primary, and then the election that then comes out of that. So one of the things I'd like to present and request for your consideration is that this item be taken out of the guideline. So it does happen, with that budget, it does sort of change and gets altered based upon whatever our elections are. But keep in mind, our expenses have also gone up with that now that we have a requirement for the state elections for early voting. With early voting, there also needs to be a police detail that's carried in that budget as well. So, so that's something for you to consider. And as we go through the budget, we may have some other areas that we may be coming back to you for consideration outside of that guideline. But right now, this is one concrete thing that we'd like to at least ask, at least for the Delta. As you've been emphasizing, the town manager and the finance team we've basically kind of concluded our meetings with our departments, and again finalizing tomorrow with our enterprise funds. So where we're at right now in this process is that we're still reviewing that. In terms of where we intend to get, we are hoping, or not hoping, we have every intention of getting to a range between 3.5 and 3% where we are right now, from where we are right now. This is going to take some work to be able to do that, especially based on all of these personnel requests that have been put forward. So that is, that is our target, that is our objective within it, and that is basically what we can relate to you tonight in terms of where we're at. But again, we are not at that range now, but we will be at the end of this process. So I know Carlin had her hand up, but that basically concludes the presentation.
Does anybody have any questions for Ryan?
I do, but I could go after Carlin if you want. Put your hands
Well, let's take let's start on the screen and then come back to the room. So Carlin?
Quick question about the clerk's budget request. 2 things. One, did I hear correctly you want to take it out of guidelines?
Well,
And number 2,
yeah.
does that 73,000 account for the reimbursement that the clerk's office receives for the state primary and state elections, state general election?
So one, yes. And the reason for that is because the elections budget tends to fluctuate significantly based upon whatever those election needs are. So and as such, we were just asking respectfully of the Finance Committee if you'd consider that within this, within the confines of the guideline. And in terms of the reimbursement, it tends to lag, and it also isn't necessarily consistent to Carlin. So we aren't making a presumption here for that in terms of what credits will be given in that point. But again, this is an ask. You're welcome to deny it, but at the same time, I have to put forward a lot of requests. We are, it's never a popular time. This is when, people put the sickle outside my office as if death has shown up and has to say no to a lot of things. It's part of the responsibilities that go with the job, but this is one of those elements that I don't know whether, that a variable that is really outside of what we would consider to be
Recurring expenditure.
it's a normal expense, but it's it fluctuates all the time. So so again, I just put it to you to consider and to think about.
Anyone else from the committee online with a question? I see no hands, so I'm going to go to Lindsay first.
Sure. One question I had is, I think a lot of us in this room work for companies who are being asked to actually reduce expenses overall. And one way that at least I'm being pressed at my company is by use of AI. Like, how can we use AI to become more efficient in every department, every job? So how are you thinking, I guess, about creating efficiency? You have these personnel requests to counter those. How are you thinking about creating efficiency in each of the departments? And then is AI a part of that? Do you have goals that have been set by Carrie or others?
Yeah, I can't say that we have any specific goals, although I do know anecdotally that it is being used, very broadly among the executive staff. In fact, actually, for our last set of minutes for the Financial Policy Working Group, it's something I use to kind of help me put that together. So we are starting to dip our toes into that. But there's so much of what we do when it comes to a tree falls down. Can't really use too much AI for that. If police are being called for domestic, there's or all the other things that the fire's doing and responding to emergencies. So I think that there is a place for AI within local government. It's emerging and changing, and as most things that we do in local government, we lag behind everyone else. So it isn't anything necessarily that we should be proud of, but it's also something that, we have a new IT director too, so I'd like to, it'd be something that I certainly want to broach with them as we think about what other opportunities those are. So, it's even something as simple just with meeting minutes. Like there are now just again, myself personally, it's something, we were at a retirement board recently meeting and looking at what those, and there's complaints about the time and energy it takes to put in do minutes, but there are now programs that you can take where you're recording, the audio and the visual. You take the audio, you put it into AI, and it's really impressive in terms of how it can save time, especially for those things that are, that they can take up a lot of time, but that this, you can take a ton of data and distill it into a very logical place. So I do get the sense that the town is definitely open-minded to it, but we also realize too, again, there's a number of limits about what we can do with it in terms of, what we need our staff to take care of in the town.
But even like, so obviously you can't replace police officers with AI, but you can help optimize scheduling of those officers, right? And optimize even where they are located around town at given times. And so there's a lot of, I guess I would encourage you to kind of really think deeply, or maybe create working groups around this, because there are if you start really brainstorming and being creative, there's a million ways to, improve efficiency in areas you might not expect. So it just might be something to consider.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Other questions in the room? Don?
Yeah, I would you know, echo that, but then also, so I'll leave that point alone, because I think you covered it perfectly. So the other thing that, I wasn't clear on the COLA question. Are you saying that there have not been any increases since 2024?
So right now, in terms of what a non-union employee is eligible for, so with our scale, presuming that the employee, after their review, is then deemed to be, you know, doing a good job and meeting meeting expectations, basically, then they're eligible to move forward one step within that process. So that one step is typically worth 2% on their pay. So that's, you know, that's a schedule that's something that's approved by town meeting every year, that goes in. So in addition, and I think this was, I'm not sure, I think it was a select board initiative, but there is also now an incentive pay program in town, Don. So we've just sort of revised the rules for that a little bit, so that supplemental goals are established for each employee, and then that will be, you know, that's reviewed with the manager, and the employee has, also has the opportunity there to get, if they meet one goal, that's, I think, it's the equivalent of 1% and two, no? So. Last year was 6 goals, but this year, what, the new program's two goals.
They haven't put out anything on
How that would be.
the amount, if they're gonna do a base amount, if they're
Yeah.
gonna do a percentage, there's been no guidance.
Yeah.
There's 2 goals right now.
Right now, so, but there is an incentive program, and I can speak to how, at least last year, was 6 goals for it. And that, using that methodology was how the incentive pay was doled out.
So your point about the $200,000, I'm having, how does that connect to who does that apply?
For the incentive pay?
No, your point, you had a bullet point of $200,000 and a reference to there hasn't been an increase.
That was for
Overtime.
200,000 plus, that wasn't for, I think that was a different bullet. You said- yeah,
It's a
that was
different
police and
bullet.
fire,
That's
a
not
different bullet,
COLA.
yeah.
Oh, it was police and fire.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah,
Right.
we.
Right.
the,
Well, I
yeah.
guess we don't have to do it tonight. I see, right, it was underneath it.
Right,
Yep.
right.
The non-union classification compensation has not been adjusted since '24.
So what that would be taking the scale and increasing it
yeah.
by some percentage.
So I think every year in the budget, there is an item, I cannot recall what it's titled, but it is for salary adjustments.
It's the salary reserve line.
Yeah,
item.
salary reserve.
That's where the incentive pay
Yeah.
is worked out.
So is this something separate from that?
What's that?
It's also for contracts that
Mhm.
that aren't.
Zach, could you speak into a microphone, because they won't hear you online?
Yeah.
So the salary reserve, part of it is, was last year for the incentive pay. Another part of it was for union contracts that weren't settled yet. For instance, our Park and Trees, the Teamsters over there, just one example, fire as well. So it's to, so once those get settled, to use those funds to make up
I see.
what that difference
Okay.
was. So it's,
Multiple
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions in the room? Peggy?
I do. So, first of all, are all, this looks to me like 5 or 6 additional FTE, mostly in administration?
I don't know what the
Okay,
final
well,
pay
we've
is.
got a new fire person for 205, a business administrator in emergency services for 128, and, well, I'll get to my question about that. Public records, 101, IT business knowledge manager, and we just have a new IT manager, so I'm not, what's the overlap there? So that right there is it's, close to $700,000. And is this, so these are all new positions from last year. We worked really hard to undo positions. It looks like you're putting some positions back.
So Peggy, let me clarify, right? Like with the capital improvement program, we're presenting what's been presented at
Okay.
this point. So we haven't really, this is something with Lois and I that we were talking about, like the timing of trying to figure out, okay, we're still basically in progress of reviewing everything. And
Okay.
in terms of what we can, what are the priorities within this, what can we afford? So that's why really the big takeaway for the Finance Committee, I would hope for tonight, would be that it is our goal to come back with 3.5, a range between 3.5 and 3%. That is
Okay.
what we have to meet.
Are these positions within that 3 to 3.5?
No, not yet. I mean,
Oh,
so
okay.
what this is part of what's been proposed, and what we need to do is go through our vetting process and to continue that, to go through that and come up with the target. Our
Okay.
goal is to get to the target, is really what we're saying.
I
So-
think, Peggy, every year, our process is at least a little out of alignment
Right.
with the budgeting entities process. This year, we were even more out of alignment with the town.
Okay.
So that's, I think, been part of the issue. We are moving toward preliminary guidelines without having as much of a window into the operating budget as we would like.
Okay.
But our choice is to put off the preliminary guidelines, which means while they're actually doing the work
Right.
to cull this down, they won't have our guidance about where we expect them to hit.
Okay.
So
if we
it's,
did all of this wish list on personnel, where would we be?
over the 3 to
Over the guidelines.
3.5%
Four,
that
four and a
they're.
half, or?
But I
Any
think, I
idea?
think the point Ryan is making is that they know, this is the range of choices they're being presented with, and they're going to make choices within it.
Okay.
So that's, we can do that we can ask Ryan to do that calculation, but
If we're gonna-
if you'd be more comfortable, I think this is an attempt to give us a sense of the breadth of the requests, but the actual work is, when did you get these requests in? Within the last few
So
days, right?
This is actually, with the exception of the IT position, you've already seen this. This was part of the initial presentation. So this is really a repeat from that. So of the things that we were discussing introducing for the budget. So
Yeah.
it's, and to follow up on Lois's point, it's really, I think it's important for the Finance Committee to consider, what that breadth is of many things that come in. And then the hard decisions then have to come, from when we push back on some of these things, because we can't simply say yes to everything.
Right.
And nor do we intend to.
So where I would get at is, if we're gonna do a preliminary guideline tonight,
Yeah.
let's say it's 3 or 3.5% or something
Mhm.
along those lines, how much of this is in there and how far away, are any of these, would these all have to be, put in that pile? We don't have the answer to that. So when we set a guideline, we don't know how much of these requests are in
Right.
this pile.
But Peggy, there are always trade-offs to be
I know.
made. So some of these may end up in there, but something else goes out to
Okay.
make room, yeah.
Yeah, regardless, we have to meet that, we have to meet the guideline you provide. And
Okay.
and that's.
Yeah, but I understand the
I mean,
concern.
it's sort of in the package
Yeah.
it's hard not to discuss it.
Eric, you had?
Yeah, I think, on the process, the guideline is supposed to come first. The guideline is supposed to inform the budget. So I think we're doing this in the right sequence. I'll get a little bit ahead of myself on when we get to deliberations on the guideline. For me, what's important is maintaining a level service, a level of services. I haven't heard any requests or demands for new services in Concord. Our population has remained essentially flat, and we're all painfully familiar with the tax situation in town. So that's going to inform my thinking and my voting on this. when we get there.
Any other comments or questions? Then, Brian, thank you. And I think we will now move on. I'm going to just briefly note, I don't think we have to have a conversation about the responses that we got from the schools. We left them with some homework 2 weeks ago, and Bob Conrad did get back with some responses. His initial response was in the packet. The second response came too late to go into the packet, so that's the one I emailed to everyone this afternoon. I don't know that there is a need to have a specific conversation about them, but it's just more information for us to consider as we're going ahead with this process, as we look to our final guidelines, which is coming up in 6 weeks, and as we examine the school's actual budget when we get into doing our work in reviewing the budget proposals and the hearings in March, when we really get into some of the nuts and bolts of the town's budget and the school's budget as they come out the other end of the sausage maker. So I think all of that information is going to be very helpful to us then. But my proposal, unless someone has some comments on it, would be to now move on and begin the actual conversation of our preliminary budget guidelines and see if we're going to be ready to do a vote. So Don, if you want to take over.
Yeah, I'm requesting sharing.
You got it, Don.
Great. Okay, so back to our guidelines process, and tonight I'll share the final metrics. We will vote on whether or not to include out-of-district in the school guidelines, and we will debate and deliberate on the preliminary guidelines and end the meeting with a vote. There's a slide packet here, and at the end, we'll move to a live spreadsheet so that we can do what-if scenarios to see anything that you'd like to see. So that's what I had in mind. So to begin with, there was one updated relevant piece of data from the Congressional Budget Office, and that was the Employment Cost Index. And so the numbers you see here are our final metrics to inform the guidelines. And in summary, they show that I'll go, since Carlin is just back from Japan, and we have others who are accustomed to reading things right to left. We start with the blue on the right. 3.06 is the inflation rate that we should be thinking that a level services budget would require. That is made up of 80% of that is the employment cost index and 20% the chained CPI for all urban areas. And this is projected ahead for the year starting in July. Then we have 3.69, that's the projected nominal increase in income, and 1.66 projected real increase in income. Now that implies 2% inflation. We're currently seeing 3% inflation, meaning the real income growth would be a point lower than that. The CBO is always optimistic that that's going to improve, so just keep that in mind. But it is nice to see at least that our projected nominal personal income growth is higher than the projected cost that's relevant for inflation for all for level services. Any questions on that? Just commit those numbers to memory as we move forward here. Okay. So a quick note, as Lois said, we're a little bit different. There's a little difference in the sequence, but as to Eric's point, I think it is actually better that we provide preliminary guidelines while the cooks are making the stew. And so we're a little earlier in the budget development cycle than we had been. We have some operating budget data that the town has given us now twice, and the schools a couple of weeks ago, and these were all rather top-line targets rather than fully baked budgets, which is really appropriate at this stage. I also wanted to mention that capital had not previously been requested or considered at this stage in the process. The town really did yeoman's duty to provide us with a wish list, and we recognize it wasn't a reviewed list. And in this presentation, you'll see, what would happen if it wasn't reviewed, if you will, right? But then also some thoughts about where we might want to end up. So to start off with, these are the budgets, the spending that is subject to guidelines in the operating budgets. This is traditionally what we have looked at this stage. So the baseline is the fiscal year 26 operating budgets of the town, CPS, CCRD, et cetera. So again, this is the budgets, total budgets for each entity, less Tier 3, Tier 2, Tier 1, and the employment benefits, the health insurance and retirement contributions. So we have traditionally thought of these as the only controllable segments of the budget. The first submission from the town had at least a reference to 3%. Maybe it should have been a range of 3 to 3.5, but I put the 3% down here. CPS did provide us with 3.5 as their first thought here. And we've all heard, I think by now, that the enrollment, Concord's share of enrollment at the high school is dropping pretty precipitously. And that decline in our share of the cost more than offsets the increase this year, meaning that our allocated cost of the regional school district would be a reduction from last year of 0.9%. We have a plug number in here of 3% for Minuteman Regional School District, although Lindsay raised a great point, which is we have more students now this coming up, so we should expect more than that. And later in this, I did jump up to a 10%. I'll point that out when it comes. We won't have those figures until, I guess, November 20. But right. It's an allocated cost. It doesn't move things, and they're not subject to guidelines. Anyway, if we were to take that first round, we'd have a 2.3% growth rate overall in the spending subject to guidelines. This slide shows just sort of one other way to look at it, which is to say, well, what if we gave the town the 3%, but we brought CPS down to 3 as well? That would be a 2.1% growth. So now I want to move into the capital policy that Ryan alluded to earlier. It's great to see that there is a policy on the books, Policy 9, that has to do with capital expenditures within the levy limit. And I'm going to walk through it. I have 2 slides for it, so bear with me here. First, there's the definition of a capital asset. And one of the to-dos following this meeting is to make sure that the schools use the same definition, that it is something with 2 years or more of life costing at least $10,000. And the mud that's in the $10,000 number is if you buy one laptop for $1,500, it's expense. But if you buy 10 of them, it's $15,000, and now it's capital. And that we just want to get alignment on that thinking. A2 speaks to a straight line depreciation schedule. Thank you, Ryan, for furnishing that schedule. I do have that now of a full list of all the assets. And in a sort of a perfect world, we'd be able to match up our depreciation with our capital. We're not going to try to attempt that at this time, but it's good to have the data. So 9B, the one with the box around it, you can bet is one I focused on here. How do we figure out how much we can spend? So this is the capital that comes out of Tier 1 and Tier 2. It's town policy that a target of 7 to 8% of the total budget net of the excluded debt levy be allocated for capital financing. Of the 7 to 8, no more than 5 shall be for debt service within the levy limit. And then capital outlay, which is the difference between that 5 and the 7 to 8, would be the cash tier 1, should be at least 2 to 3% of that outlay. It's great that we have a policy. I think it could be better crafted, and maybe, something for next year's policy, if there is a policy group, to work on. But it is nice to have it. And the next slide was my attempt at turning it into formulas here so that we can apply them. So box number 1, 7 to 8% of the total budget. So I should pause and say what's unclear about this, when this refers to total budget net of excluded debt levy. So is it per budgeting entity, or is it per overall? And it makes sense to me that it couldn't possibly be that, if it meant the general fund, it would have said general fund, right? In fact, it's in the title of, so they don't mean that for this line. I think it applies per entity, so the town has theirs and the schools have theirs. The purpose of a policy like this is to ensure that we are doing enough to keep things up, right? To replace things when they need to be replaced, because sometimes towns neglect capital and there isn't, and then things are breaking and they fall behind. So it's great to have this policy. I think that it could be interpreted, and has by some, as we add up everybody's, and as long as the total fits within the total, we're okay, if that makes sense. So if some entity has no tier 1, then the others get more. We'll talk about that as we move forward. So in this slide, you see at the bottom a little box, like a little score box, and it has those 3 green rectangles. The first, the upper left little box says greater than or equal to 2 to 3%, and that's tier 1. Less than or equal to 5%, that's tier 2, and then 7 to 8% is those two combined. Okay. So I thought, let's begin by applying that to the current year's fiscal budget, see where we are. So this, and every line is numbered at the baseline, the budget lines are numbered, and then the letters below are the percentages that come out of that budget. And I wanted to number them in letters just so that we could have conversation. You could say, line 5, what do you mean, right? So let's walk through this. We have the town's budget subject to guidelines, CPS, and CCRSD. Line 2 says joint accounts, insurance and benefits. This one's never been allocated that I've seen. So I just applied the percentages. I just added the 2 numbers above, figured the percentages, that's off to the far right column, and applied that to those. It's a rough approximation since both are largely labor cost. That's everything from the Medicare funding, the insurance, the pension contribution, et cetera. The capital piece of the joint accounts is really easy to allocate because it's actually broken out in different warrant articles. So we kind of know what's what. So we have tier 1 for the town, $2,520,000. Tier 2 for the town, $4,707,000. That comes right out of our budget last year. And now we get to that magic number that's referenced on the policy, total budget X tier 3. And there we see those numbers. Then I made the line for the tier 3 debt service, and we have the total budget, and below that add up tier 1 plus tier 2 plus tier 3 to get to the total cost of capital. Any questions about that organization or process before I continue? Okay. Move down to the expense table down below, line A. You see the percentage, all of these A through D are the percentage of line 6, total budget X tier 3, because that's what's referenced. And the town's budget was at 5.2% on tier 1. On tier 2, it was 9.8%. And we add those two together to get Tier 1 and 2, 15%. The town very, very light on Tier 3, but Tier 3 isn't in the policy, but it's very light, so 0.9. So the total 15.7% of all of the town spending was for capital. Now, if we read all the way across to the black box, 13.9, that's how much of the entire general fund is for capital. There's no policy in town to speak to that. This is the number, though, that we, over time, want to manage to around 10% as a healthy number. There is no limit. I mean, you could, if we wanted to, we could borrow all the way up to 80% or something of our spending. But yes, Lois.
Where does the 10% number come from?
The state.
I just want you to state that. I think
Yeah.
you and I have discussed it,
Yeah.
but you're getting that 10% figure as a goal to reduce this to from the state guidelines on what towns should be carrying as debt.
Yeah, the state has sort of best practices in a general way. And in part, they put that out there in the context of don't starve yourself for capital. You should be spending about 10% overall between Tier 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think we have that problem. We don't starve ourselves for capital.
No, but what we're saying is that
Yeah.
as of,
Yeah,
for FY '26, we are close to 4% over that.
right. And now let's work our way through them. So if we go to CCRSD for a minute, look at that, right at 10%. We have a lot of Tier 3 debt there, and almost no Tier 1 or Tier 2. Makes sense. When you have a new building, you don't need to spend a lot of capital, right? CPS is 13%. Well, they have is Tier 3, so 13.2 overall. But they have a lot of new buildings that we're paying off and very little in Tier 1 and Tier 2. And the town, of course, hasn't had a new building since, I don't know, before I was born, maybe, I don't know. So you think that that's going to cause the need for more Tier 2 capital for the town. The other thing is, this is a kind of actually, it turns out when I dug into it, that's not a big variable here. What is it? And I'll show you where the Tier 2 money is going. But what is important, and this is something I think we'll have to just sort out outside of the session, the town borrows money to buy trucks, let's say. The schools lease. So the schools have a capital leasing expense that we're not counting in this metric. I think we should, because it's pretty established that capital leases are a form of debt. So we'll put that in there, so to be apples to apples. But anyway, so that's our baseline, and if you look at that little scorecard, it shows 2.6% on Tier 1. This is the addition, this is the town plus the CPS. If we added them together, while the Tier 1 debt was 5.2 from the town, it was only 0.5 from CPS. So add them together, and we're not doing too bad. Tier 2, we were over the limit. And Tier 3, and then the box to the right is those two added together. It's right in between 7 and 8%. Okay, let's move on. Yes.
Sorry, Don. Town Tier 3, I assume the roads are not in there yet.
That's great point. No.
Excellent point.
Good segue,
Haven't
yeah.
started, good segue,
Okay.
because that,
Because that was a big borrowing, and
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So Peggy, I'll start with that then on this next slide. I took the numbers we heard from the town in September and from the schools a couple weeks ago and said, well, what if we all said, yes, let's do it all? Where would we be? And I figured that first year of borrowing for the roads, put it at 4%. And so now you see line 7 for the town, it's $1,155,000 here in this spreadsheet. That's a placeholder in there for that town, plus our Tier 3 would have fallen without that, but now it's going up. Now, what's really interesting to keep in mind is that number is only the first year of debt service. If we continue to borrow as per plan, as approved, we're going to borrow a little more than $5 million a year for the next 5 years. So about every year, that number is going to go up by about $750,000. So we're going to get to a very healthy percentage of Tier 3 already, just from the roads. So if we did everything which you see here, this is 3% on the controllable, the subject to guideline spending, and then the asks, or I guess it shouldn't, what should we call it? The unvetted list, right? Our total town spending would grow by 6% over last year, even though the subject to guidelines spending was only growing 3%. Our total, now let's jump down to line E, the total cost of capital as a percent of it would be 18.7. Our debt, tier 2 debt service, line B, would be 10.4 on the town side. Jumping over to the score box there, everything is red in this case because, tier 1 is over the 3%, tier 2 is over the 5%, and the combined total would be over the 8%. So we know that we need to, the town, thankfully the town knows that we need to make some cuts on these things and is working on it. I think the other point I wanted to make on this one is that I tried to footnote what assumptions I was using in case, so everybody could follow along. Any questions on this one? No, okay. So the next one I would say is a straw man that I put together for our consideration here tonight. The proposed preliminary guidelines, operating budget growth. I said, well, what if we did 3% for the town? Because that's our metric for inflation. 3% for CPS, they've asked for 3.5. What if we said 3? CCRSD, what if we left it at what they asked, minus 0.9, and we put in a plug of 10% on Minuteman in this slide. But then we also gave guidance on tier 1 and tier 2. So on tier 1, for this illustration, I'm proposing, well, what if we said 3% for the town? And what if we use a number like 2 for the CPS? Because that range is supposed to be 2 to 3, right? For tier 2 debt service, I'm showing 9%, and I want to explain why. I will explain in more detail in a minute with the next slide, but tier 2 is 10-year debt. You can't just turn it off. You still have to pay for all the prior approvals. So I looked at what would happen if we spent nothing, right? And then looked at the wish list and said, no, we can't do nothing. There's going to be something here. So this 9% is what I would see as the first step in a process of reducing overall that, but in some way that we can afford, and without cutting off our what's the word, cut off your nose to spite your face or something like that, causing ourselves harm in the process. And the fact that the roads came out of tier 2 is going to help, right? So we're going to take a look at how much that helps in a minute. So if we did this, the town spending growth, instead of going up 6%, would only go up, looking at line 10 here, 0.8% overall spending. So that same 3% growth for the operating budget, which was remember the operating budget plus the unconstrained capital was going to grow the expenses by 6% at the town level. By constraining it to these numbers, we're only growing it overall by 0.8. And that's because such a big reduction is taking place in tier 1. And there's also a reduction in tier 2. Ryan, I have to say, it occurred to me after this was done that I didn't see in that spreadsheet that you sent me, the debt spreadsheet, I didn't see the borrowing for the tier 2 items that were approved at town meeting.
So the debt schedule you have is the debt that's already been.
Yeah. So we authorized quite a bit of additional tier 2 debt at town meeting that's not yet in this number. And we may not be able to get that down below 4.7, I'm showing 4.3, even with no additional spending. It's going to be something we're going to have to really manage. And I did the math. How could we get this down to policy, down to 5%? And it would take 10 years to get down there. Now, we know that CPS and CCRSD have newish buildings, but we've also heard from the schools that those elementary schools are getting to the 20-year mark. Alcott is. So that's going to need a roof. maybe it's going to need a boiler or air conditioning. My point is just that the schools are going to need Tier 2 capital, and their Tier 3 capital is getting paid down, right? So as of next year, CPS's Tier 3 is going to be down to 10% of the overall budget. The next year, it'll be below 10. That creates some nice room, right? As long as the town isn't using that capacity, we can do what we need to do to keep up the schools, which is the good news. And I have to say, after doing this, I was so thankful that the Public Works Committee did this bond issue last year, because that is going to help us so much to get there. As long as we don't allow other needs and wants to come in and fill that vacuum, we can get there over the next 10 years.
Get there with the Tier 1 and 2, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Because they shoved it into Tier 3.
They shoved it into Tier 3, and as I said, Tier 3 is going to climb rapidly. So even with this really, reduction, big reduction in Tier 1, is 58% reduction from the list that we saw. A big reduction in Tier 2, because of the roads, still spending 14% of the town's overall.
Right.
That's the town column on row E. And as I say, I think that I'm probably overly optimistic on what that Tier 2 debt service can come down to in this presentation. What is nice about these numbers is you notice that little score box off in the lower right, it's all green, right? We got Tier 2 where it needs to be, Tier 1 where it needs to be, and the overall combined Tier 1 and 2 at 7.5. Yes, Lindsay?
I just got a question about Tier 1 for the town.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you got to that 3%? Because my understanding was that most of Tier 1 for the last few years has been roads, right? And so now that roads are not in Tier 1 anymore, is there an opportunity to push on that anymore?
Actually, it was Tier 2.
Oh, it's Tier 2 is roads,
yeah.
okay.
So Tier 1 are things that are between $10,000 and $250,000.
Oh, okay, okay.
Like a
Okay.
copier.
Okay,
Well, a police car, a new truck for the DPW, yeah.
Really small truck.
A small truck, yeah.
okay,
yeah.
so.
Pickup
Tier-
truck.
So, then I guess the same question then applies to Tier 2. So, but you're saying a lot of that is debt that we already have, so that's just gonna naturally go down over time?
Yeah, but like you say, so here, this may not be in your packet, it was a
was
late
emailed.
edition.
It
I did this in
Oh,
response
actually,
to.
I do have that. I'll pull that up for myself.
Lindsay's sent me a question, and I thought, okay, I should pull this together. Yes, Kathy?
The prior slide shows the town at 7.2% for Tier 1.
Yes.
You're proposing that they cut that to 3?
Yes.
Well, the 7.2 was, remember, his unvetted list from a month ago. That was that huge list of capital requests that Ryan said was yet to be vetted.
My concern is what is in that 7.2. We do want to keep up. We know that the town buildings are old, and we know that the town needs things. So, again, it's one thing to play with numbers. It's another to, I'd want to know the substance.
We have that list, and I did go through it. You can go, you should as well, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Carlin has had her hand up too.
Lois?
Hi, Don.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Carlin is.
Carlin
Go
has-
ahead,
yeah.
please, I'm sorry, I was just looking at something else.
It's a great,
No.
it's a great.
Thank you. Don, I think you've done a really good job on this. I really appreciate that, and I understand almost all the calculations. I have two questions, though.
Yeah.
Just very basically, looking at the FY27 preliminary guidelines, line, under the output, line A,
Yes.
you have two numbers, a 3% under the town, 2% under CPS. And then is that an average of those three to be 2.4%, or is there some type of weighting
That is
going along to get that 2.4%?
Yeah, the 2.4 is the town and CPS. actual percentages behind the, 3.0 is a rounding, but remember, CPS is a bigger budget. CPS has a larger share of.
So there is a weighting of
It's
how much the money is. Okay.
It's weighted by
that makes
line
sense.
1 in the outputs. Yep.
Okay, next question is on the CPS portion, and I think I might have addressed this earlier. I wasn't sure about your response, though. You dropped it from 3.5% to 3.0%, which is effectively a cut of about $260,000. Where did that go? Is it just gone? That's what you're proposing?
I think the preliminary guidelines are always that, Carlin. It's always a matter of, we don't do line item edits of budgets or say, what to cut or anything. We come up with what the target should be.
Okay, but did you shift any of that to capital?
Thank you for that question, Carlin. Actually,
That's what I'm getting at.
I did
Yeah.
shift some money to capital. It did occur to me, and I have a little spreadsheet on the side that it's not part of the presentation, that said that I went through the CPS budget, and the computer example is real, right? They have about $140,000 in their operating budget for computers that should be a Tier 1 capital item. And that would be an easy pickup for them. And it's not only is it an easy pickup, it is correct accounting, right, to put it in the right bucket. I think it's important that we get everybody on the same page, especially when we have a metric that applies to everybody. But that said, we also know that we have 20-year-old schools, right? At least one of them is 20 years old, and the others are coming up. And there has to be a need for replacement capital, and the whole purpose of this policy is so everybody has some money to do that replacement capital. Now, the high school is a little different because we see an allocation of a total budget. We don't really give a guideline on, the same way. I put it, in my mind, it's a little more like the Minuteman Regional School District. But that said, that's kind of where that is. And the drop, what's really interesting is that the Tier 3 debt for the high school is dropping so fast that even though you'll see that line 10 is lower than the operating budget change. So the operating budget change of minus 0.9, once you account for the drop in Tier 3 debt, it becomes a negative 1.3 for the town. And go down to the bottom line E, output line E, the high school gets below that magic number of 10% in total expending on capital. And so that's a pretty healthy place to be.
Eric?
Sorry, is that, I'm sorry, minus 0.3%, or it doesn't say minus there?
Minus 1.3 in line 10.
Line 10, under the high school says 0.3.
I'm sorry, Peggy. I caught an error in the packet.
And the same with,
It says CCRSD is 0.9 at the top, and it
Yeah.
was supposed to be minus 0.9.
I thought so.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry about
thank
that. And I'll.
Is that what your question?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, yep. Sorry. So you're, on this, the screen doesn't agree with what you have in the packet. Sorry about that.
I see.
Yes, Lindsay?
Question, so you identified the computers that could come out of the operating budget and go into Tier 1. Did you have a conversation about anything else? Because I remember there are buses, too.
Yeah, so I did ask them, I haven't had a conversation with anybody, I just looked at the budget.
Okay.
But I did add that question to the schools, say how much of your operating budget is for capital leases, essentially.
Yeah, because the buses last year, the number that they gave me was 2 buses at $170,000 each.
Yeah, it's roughly, it's in that neighborhood for CCRSD and that same neighborhood for CPS. Bob gave us the detail. I think it's 310,000 at CPS and 340 or 50 for the high school.
But I
provided
think it
that
was
as well.
only CCRSD that was putting it in their operating budget. And
Oh, is that
CPS
right?
was putting it in Tier 1.
Well,
Which
we'll-
is
we'll
might
have to
have been
sort that
something
out.
because of the regional district and them having difficulty not putting it all in the budget
Yeah.
for the towns to split it up,
Yeah,
So it's just something to look into.
So I want to bring this back to what we have to accomplish tonight. And the capital issues are fascinating, and they are not something we have spent a lot of time on in the past. And my sense of the committee is that this is something we have an interest in, and we want to be more focused on. And this will lead very nicely into the hearing that we're having on December 8th, jointly with the schools and the town, to really delve into capital. But our mission tonight is to set a guideline for the budgeting process going forward, a preliminary guideline that we will be discussing again in November and reviewing and making final tweaks to in December. Capital, there had been some discussion at the last meeting of capital being part of the guideline. I think my sense of this is that we don't need to be setting separate guidelines for capital. There is a financial policy that sets a framework for the capital. Our role is to highlight that, look and see where we are in relation to it, and to identify potential areas for improvement against the existing policy. It may be that one of the homework assignments we take for later in the year and for future finance committees is to look at that policy and think about, are the numbers right? Is the language correct? Can it be applied? Is it being consistently applied? I think that's a separate project. So I think what we're now looking at is setting the preliminary guidelines. And in order to do that, we need to make some decisions about what is or isn't included in the preliminary guidelines. We know there was discussion last week about the out-of-district placements for the schools. Ryan just raised one issue tonight on the town side, which is the election costs for FY27, because that year is a cycle where there's more elections than there are in other years. So do we want to take those questions separately? Do we want to start with a discussion of out-of-district for the schools? Are we ready to move to that, or do people?
Suresh has his hand up.
Suresh?
Yeah, I have a question for Dawn, thanks. Under the output for line item C for CCRSD, it's a blank. Is there something missing there?
Yeah, so the tier one spending of the CCRSD is included in their operating budget, so I wasn't able to estimate what that is. But that said, Suresh, our policy doesn't speak to it, so
Okay.
I didn't
All
feel
right.
that it was pertinent to the
Thanks.
conversation tonight. Thanks.
Okay, so are we ready to move to a discussion of, let's start with out-of-district? We can go around the room, or I will begin. And I listened. I wasn't physically here for the last meeting, but I heard every word. And Lindsay did a great job chairing. Thank you, Lindsay. I should have begun by thanking you. And I listened to the schools. I've looked at their presentation. My view is that out-of-district placements should be in guidelines this year. Last year, they came to us with a specific circumstance, a particular need, and we were responsive to it. They're not making that ask this year. They're not seeing the extraordinary situation they were anticipating. If we decide to do what has been done ever since I've been on the committee, except last year, and leave out-of-district placement in guidelines, that will not prevent future finance committees from reacting to an ask on the part of the schools, an extraordinary situation, and helping them adapt, helping them manage it. I didn't see that need in the materials they presented this year. I also am well, maybe I'll just stop there for the moment, but that's my view on this. And I don't think it's the moment to make a motion, but I just want to encourage discussion and conversation about it, and then we can consider a motion. So, other thoughts? Anyone online? Carlin?
So what's the actual dollar change? If we include it, what's the dollar impact? If we exclude it, what's the dollar impact?
Carlin, this year, it's going to be lower than last year. So there is no material impact, and they said that they will treat it, they won't take that as savings that they can spend elsewhere. They treat it more as a zero-based cost.
Eric?
I agree with your position, Lois. I know we talked about this already in our previous meeting. They're in a very different place than they were last year. I strongly support keeping it in guidelines this year.
And there's just one other thing I want to add to what I just said. There are other mechanisms for managing unexpected costs, and I have a particular focus on this now because of the work that Don and I are doing with Ryan and with Wendy Ravelli on the Financial Policy Working Group. If you know that there's something coming, you can set up a reserve against it. You can manage in anticipation the same way that we anticipated and managed for the spike in taxes resulting from the borrowing for the middle school. All of these are tools that can be used. I just feel strongly that we haven't been asked to do it this year, the need isn't there, and the ability to make the adjustment next year is very much in the hands of next year's committee, which will include many of you. So, other comments, questions, thoughts?
I just
Kathy?
wanted to say that I concur with your assessment.
And I guess I have the opposite stance on this. I think this is something that's like the joint accounts. This is something that there's very little visibility into and very little control that the school district has over what these expenses are going to be, because they don't set the tuition rates at any of these institutions. And the unpredictability of the reimbursement rate, especially on the transportation side, and then the amount that is reimbursed, it feels like it feels onerous to include this in guidelines because of how little control the school superintendent has over these numbers. So I guess I strongly support leaving it out of guidelines going forward, is my position.
Anyone else like to speak? Pat?
I hear you, Lindsay, but I think our superintendent is trying very hard to examine the number of individuals, case by case, and try to create programs that are expensive to keep people in our community. And one of the reasons why I would like for it to go back into guidelines, and I concur that if something unusual happens, let's re-vote on it. I said that last time. If it's a yearly basis, that's fine for me too. Is I'd like to keep tabs, sort of incentives for our system to keep trying to adjust, to bring the people of our town to stay in our town. And I think having it in guidelines sends that message.
Any other thoughts, or is it time for a motion?
Can I make one response to that?
Sure.
Because I think I thought of something similar at our last meeting, but I reconsidered it and thought the primary goal of the schools committee and the superintendent is really what is best for the student and the learning community. So, and I feel like the financial piece is important, but should be secondary to that in these cases. So that's why I kind of reversed my own thinking on that one.
Any motions? I'm the chair, I can't make a motion.
I learned that the hard way.
Would somebody,
I move to include out-of-district placement costs in this year's guideline.
Second.
any further discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, can you do roll call?
Time for a roll call on the motion presented. Suresh Bhatia,
Yeah.
Peggy Briggs,
Nay.
Brian Conway,
Yes.
Kathy Kupalo,
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
Pat Geyer, yes. Don Kupka.
I said at last meeting that I should recuse myself because of knowing somebody.
Understood. Lindsay List,
No.
Carlin Reed,
No.
Shri Tupel. See here?
Yes.
Yes. And Lois Wasco.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses, 2 noes, 1 abstain.
There were
There
3
were three
noes.
no's.
3 noes.
Peggy,
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
Peggy,
Lindsay,
Carlin,
and
and Lindsay.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was
Yeah.
3 no's.
Sorry, Peggy, I didn't catch you. Thank you.
I think Suresh was also a no.
No, Suresh receipts are out.
I was a yes.
Yeah, Shresh.
Oh, he was a yes, sorry. That was my mistake.
Am I allowed to go back?
No,
No, it's okay.
no,
He
he
said-
just confirmed
he
it
just
was, he
said,
was a yes.
yeah.
And it's on the table.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
excellent. Okay.
Okay, the next question that came up about items out of guidelines is Ryan's suggestion about the election, about leaving the election costs out of guidelines. Is there any discussion on that? Any thoughts on that
Carlin's
proposal?
hand is raised right away.
Carlin, you're up.
Thank you. I have a little bit of familiarity with how the mail-in ballot process works for the town clerk's office, because I've been involved in it for the last 5 years. I'm not in favor of having it taken out of guidelines, and here's why. Predictability. In odd number years, there will be one or two elections. It's the town election, basically, or maybe a special town election. In even number years, there will be 3 or 5, depending on if it's a national election or just the state elections. That's a pretty predictable cycle. And the primary cost for these elections, I believe, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, the primary cost is the cost of postage. That's a little more predictable than otherwise, and I don't see how it merits taking out of guidelines. Now, keep in mind, it's a very small amount, given our $147 million budget. It's only $73,000, so it's not a big deal. I was just curious for why that particular item was suggested as being taken out of budget, because I don't see the justification for it at this time.
So if I may, Carl, some of the other expenses are, there's the personnel costs. If you have early elections, it means you have to man that for 2 weeks beforehand. So that's part of the cost. You have to have a police detail. The state asks that the police detail be present for early elections as well as the actual elections. So it's really just, those are the other costs. And you're right, postage is also part of it as well. So, but there is variability, as you point out, but it's beyond just the postage in terms of what the costs are.
Peggy?
I agree with Carlin. I don't think we should take this out of guidelines. It's a small amount. There are other variables from the election department, special town meetings, special town elections for overrides. None of those, in the past, no one's put their hand up and say, oh, geez, we can't do that because we don't have the money.
Yeah. And
They
those
should
are
take
more-
an average, put it in the budget every year, and roll it over to the busier years from the slower years.
And if I could too, what we try to do though is based upon and reflect the costs of the budget for what the next cycle is gonna be.
Yeah.
So, and each cycle changes, so that's.
Just-
Any further discussion?
I just quickly, I agree. I agree with Colin and Peggy. I appreciate the request, Ryan. I think you're doing your duty by making it, but I don't see a compelling need. I'm also cognizant of the precedent we'd be setting with something like this, where, I mean, I could see future FinComs having just like what's in, what's
Death by a
out, you know,
thousand
yeah,
cuts.
I think we got to hold the line on this.
So are we ready for motion?
I move to keep the election expenses within the guideline budget.
Second?
Second?
Okay, Madam Clerk?
Yes, roll call. Shresh Bhatia,
Yes.
Peggy Briggs,
Yes.
Brian Conway,
Yes.
Kathy Kupko,
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
Pat Geyer, yes. Don Kupka,
Yes.
Lindsay List,
Yes.
Carlin Reed,
Yes.
Shri Tupel,
Yes.
and Lois Waskoff.
Yes.
Unanimous.
So now, at 8:30, we're going to review the discussion leading up and the presentation that Don made to make a decision about what guidelines we are setting for the budgeting entities. I'm going to propose to save time, but not to cut off conversation. Don, why don't you make a motion based on your slides for the guideline levels that you were recommending? And then we can have our discussion after there's a motion on the table.
So to be clear, Lois, you're suggesting we table a conversation about capital, and we only discuss
We're only discussing the guidelines.
the guidelines we've always used.
Unless,
Budget.
Yep, operating budget.
unless there's
Okay.
some sense of the committee that we need to address capital now beyond what we have done, and this has been great, if we feel we need to take a vote to tell the town and the schools we want them to comply with an existing
Yeah.
policy, we can, but I don't think we need to or should. The policy is there,
Right,
and this conversation highlighted it.
right.
I think our job is to set the preliminary guidelines for the operating budgets and send everybody back to do their jobs, and we'll learn more over time, and we'll make a final decision on our final guidelines in 6 weeks. So, I mean, if you're not comfortable proceeding that way, I'm open to suggestions. Cognizant of the time, but open to suggestions.
So I will move to, let's see, I guess, I have a live Excel. I did want to share one more point on capital that was in that presentation I just stopped sharing, but it had to do with where that money goes in Tier 2. But we can do it another time.
I think we can do it another time, because I don't think that's a vote for tonight, and I think it's very valuable, and I think I should take that as a follow-up item for the agenda for the November 20th meeting.
Okay. Well, I don't feel comfortable making a proposal on the operating guidelines, in large part because we've received numbers from the budget units, and we have never discussed them. So I'd like to have some discussion among this group. I'd like to hear positions before we make a motion.
Change your motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start going around the room here. Let's start with Peggy.
No questions.
Pat?
I'd like
Save you
to,
time.
do you have some insight of the 3.5% on the CPS?
It's a very high level. It's just like the towns. They hadn't yet developed the detail. So it was just a very high level. This is where we think we'd like to come in, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Do you have a sense, Dawn, in your workbook of the tax implications of these?
Eric, I don't yet
increasing.
have the tax implications, and I know last year that was the focus of our conversation, and it occurred to me that while that's an important check, we need to be looking at the adequacy of the funding and the overall spend. And So I'm going to use as a proxy for the overall spend the numbers we got for the Tier 2 for inflation of the insurance costs, et cetera. And then for lack of a better option, I'm going to use the numbers we've seen so far, which we know are unvetted and won't stand, and see what the total impact will be. I want to say that the decline of Tier 3 expense at CPS and CCRSD is a big help this year, as well as the fact that CCRSD is asking for a reduction because so many students have left the school district. So that even if we were to fund, as this slide shows, at the full request for everything, the total spending would increase 2.1%, which is less than the 2.5% of the Prop 2.5.
The tax rate hearing is November 17th. So that's when the select board will be hearing from the assessors and setting the tax rate. Would knowing that tax rate help you? Would it be more useful to look at this again when we're going through our process of doing final guidelines?
Yeah, I don't think we need the tax rate. We need the revenue projections from other sources.
Which we don't have.
Which, well, there's a straw man for those that Ryan gave us on September 25. That gives us some sense of what the town's expecting, and it's similar to this. It's sort of 2% increase here, or it's not. It's a rough estimate, but that's how this process comes together.
Okay. Lindsay?
I'm just thinking about, almost like, let's not squander this opportunity to have very low guidelines, knowing that Tier 3 debt service is likely to spike over the next few years as the town needs to replace some of its larger assets. So I'm thinking like that, to keep it as low as we can, and so that's just my stance is similar to last year, that we're going to see taxes increase just because of Tier 3 debt service over the next 5 years. We know that's going to happen. So to the extent that we can keep this really low on the operating side, I think we should take the chance to do so.
Okay.
Kathy?
First of all, I just want to say, Dawn, you've done a tremendous amount of work, and it shows.
Thank you.
I like the idea of giving the town and the schools the same guideline. Wasn't that our goal last year,
Just to be fair across how we approached it, yeah.
Yeah, so I do like that idea. I wasn't quite sure, Dawn, how you made that decision to go from 3.5 to 3, but I do like the parity, and I agree with Lindsay that we should keep things under control as much as we can.
So Kathy, in that straw man where I did that to 3, it was just that same exact sentiment that you just expressed. The other thing, though, to keep in mind is that there is an enrollment decline as well at CPS. We did get some data from the schools about what the variable cost is, and it's very, very, very little variable cost. And with the answers they supplied today, we have more visibility into overall growth of staffing. I want to say without, I should probably wait to actually show the actual numbers. So I think everybody has received them, but you see the declining enrollment of students has come with a rising number of employees. And so there's been an increase in expense along with the increase in budget, while the number of students have been lower. So that's a separate conversation, I think. If we were to say 3% CPS, it'll be more than a 3% increase in the cost per student. And so some of that money will go into other needs within the school, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. Let's go online. Carlin?
So Don, let me make sure I understand what we'll be voting on. What you're proposing are preliminary guidelines of 3% operating budget for the town, 3% operating budget for CPS, negative 0.90% for the regional school district. Is that right?
Well, we haven't made a motion, and I was hoping to have more.
It says proposed.
It does say proposed, I know, but I just needed a straw man. I really didn't expect
He's
to.
making a tool. He made a tool.
I made a tool, and I had to put in something to get us started. But
That's
I
fine.
wanted
Just
to
what
hear some
numbers
thoughts.
are we talking about?
And the 3%, we're talking about the operating budget increase, that's all. If maybe it makes it easier if that cell was empty, right? I don't know. But I didn't feel as though, the only real factual basis I have is that the inflation metric is at 3%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why it's preliminary.
And
that's right,
And that's
yeah.
why these are preliminary
Yeah.
guidelines. And if it turns out that the budgeting entities, and I say this in front of one of them, come back and say, we can't make this work, they have an opportunity between now and our final decision on December 11th to present why it doesn't work. And we can look at that request in the context of the impact on taxes and the headroom that we have for Prop 2.5. So, you know,
Although, if we were to use these numbers for 2 of the 3 entities, we'd be using their original proposal. So if they come back and say, we can't make it work, it's because once they really got into it, they saw a problem. It's not as if we're asking them to go lower than their original proposal.
Right,
That's-
no one should come back to us complaining, except for CPS.
Right.
I'd like to call.
Because we've already seen these
Okay,
numbers
well,
from
if Eric
the
has-
town and the high
Don, just
school.
one note, I mean, I did provide a range, 3.5 to 3%.
Was that in your September 25?
No,
I
it
took your
was in his
spreadsheet.
presentation today.
Yeah, it was in this
So, I
spreadsheet,
mean, I
yeah.
just give myself
Fair
some
enough.
flexibility.
Yeah.
Eric, I'm going to get to you. I want to find out, are there any more comments online? Suresh, Brian, who else is online? Sri? Any
Brian
other
has his hand up.
comments or
Oh,
questions?
Brian has his hand.
Brian?
Well, so Don, thank you for, this is, as a new member of the committee, this is really, really helpful to learn what's going on. I guess my comment is, and maybe this is a new member naive question, but if someone's asking for 3%, why would we not go lower to at least anchor, have them try to hit a lower goal, like in 2.5%, or, that seems incredibly reasonable. It will, compared to, every other company that's cut it, every other sort of entity that's trying to not increase their costs, at the rate of inflation. We should be aiming to increase our cost, our operating budget lower than inflation, as just a goal. That's my only comment, is to, I agree with the members who have commented we should set the initial guidelines low.
Anyone else online? I'm not seeing any hands. Am I missing anything, Zach? No, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, Eric, you had another comment?
I agree with what Brian said, and with what I think Lindsay was getting at. I look at it as we owe it to the process, and we owe it to the taxpayers to take call it a muscular stance on the preliminary guidelines. We should start low. The guidelines, again, are meant to inform the budgets, not the other way around. We shouldn't take their number as our starting point. They should take our number as their starting point. So I'm in favor of starting much, much lower. I can't argue with the CCRSD number. It's negative. I never thought I'd live to see the day. But on the town and the schools,
Minus 2%.
we should start significantly lower. And we're not done. That's the preliminary guideline. So when we sit down to set the final guideline, that's our opportunity to ask, what did we miss? Or where did we, what did we fail to account for when we set this number?
So where would you like to start?
I don't know. I'm still thinking through it. I'm reflecting on the metrics.
Everybody's
Yeah.
ducking it.
All right, why don't we, Don, could you put the metric slide back
And
up?
Carlin also has her hands up,
Oh,
too.
Yeah.
well, I'm going to call on Carlin and then still ask Don to put the metric slide back up.
Thank you, Lois. And my comment is about the metrics. The rate of inflation that we have is 3.06, which is less than the 3% that's proposed by the town and less than what the
The other way, it's slightly more.
preliminary suggested.
Yeah.
Well, my apologies, right, 3.06 is more than that. So we're undercutting the rate of inflation by going to a 3% level.
By coming in at 3.0.
So to go back to the metrics, 3.06 is the blended rate of inflation that we believe is appropriate for the town and schools.
And the 3.4, the middle one, the tall bar?
That's the projected nominal personal income growth. So the growth in income before inflation, and in this case, actually before change in taxes.
So it's leaving a little more money in the pockets of the taxpayers.
Only if we don't.
Not including capital.
Only if we don't account capital, which,
Total
so
taxes
remember,
go up.
Lois, the reason I took this detour is because we settled on guidelines, and then our spending grew more than 2% higher than the guidelines.
Right. No, I understand. I remember. I understand.
I have to say, I think if we only focus on the operating budget, we have no way to predict what the tax rate will be.
Don, this work is unbelievable. I've been thinking that we should try to get the town to issue tax bills that say operating taxes and capital taxes, because we've done pretty well in recent years with the operating budget, right? It's been hoeing pretty close to inflation. And the reason the taxes are going through the roof is the middle school, in a nutshell.
No.
And then we're gonna get the roads, and all this other capital.
And other debt.
And other debt.
In fact, Peggy, last year we offset the middle school increase with that reserve release, and still our spending went up by 2% above the guidelines.
Yeah,
It was other borrowing.
Okay, so debt, and this work is fantastic. I'll make a motion,
Okay.
since everyone else is ducking it. I move that we identify a preliminary guideline for operating budgets, 3% for the town, 3% for CPS, and minus 1% for the district.
Okay. Do we have a second for Peggy's motion?
Or someone can make another motion.
I'm not here.
I have a question before you do the second. Peggy, did you say minus 1% for the regional? Because what they have on their sheet, the
Just
sheet was
round,
minus 0.9.
I was trying to round it.
If you round it,
I just rounded it. Minus 1%.
Okay.
So do we have a second for Peggy's motion so we can start having the discussion on the motion?
I will second it.
Thank you, Suresh. So I have a question to kick off the discussion. What is the number impact of every reduction of 0.1% in the guideline? So if we're talking about a 2.9 or a 2.8, what's the real actual impact of that? I know we haven't done the calculation about the impact on our taxes. What's the impact on the operating divisions? How much more do they need to
how many
cut?
dollars?
Well,
It's going to
for
be more
example,
for
on
the
the
schools
town,
than it is for the town.
Right.
town is 34,000, it's called 34 million. So 1% difference is 340,000,
46,000, so
Yeah.
about 170,000.
right?
Lois, is your question 1/10%? I didn't.
Well, let's work our way down a little bit, because Peggy, we have a motion, and now we're having a discussion. In Peggy's motion, the guideline numbers, absent CCRSD, which is in a different situation this year because Carlisle is paying, but we're not. Let's look at that number. What does Ryan have to find in his budget? If we
Sure.
say the guideline is 2.8 instead of 3, what do the schools have to find in their budget?
Yeah, we can do that in this spreadsheet tool.
You just take your line number 1 and
Right.
apply that percentage.
So if so Lois,
Yes.
that output 1, 34,689, is with the 3% increase. If we change that to 2.9%, 34,655, it's
So it goes down by,
very, 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 very little.
okay. And for the schools?
655, 689, so that was about 34,000. Which makes sense, 34 million, right?
Yeah, 34,
Yeah.
yeah, 34,000.
That's what I was just getting at.
34,000.
It's just-
$34,000
Okay.
per 1/10 of a point. Right.
Okay, and for the schools?
49,000 for CPS per 1/10 of a point.
Okay.
It's 490,000, isn't it?
Well,
For a 1/10 or 1%? A 1/10 of a
a
percent?
1/10 of a percent would be
10%.
34,000.
9,000.
Yeah, but we're not talking about,
So if you do a half
we're
a
talking about
percent.
a 2% guideline. If I thought,
Yeah, no, right.
no.
So if
We're
you
talking
did-
about a guideline that is noticeably under inflation.
So if it's 2.5%,
If you change it
Then
by,
it goes
if you change it by 1%, that's 1% not a 10th. It's
Then you-
346,890.
Yeah.
And if
Correct.
it's 5%, divide that by 2,
you mean 0.5.
and it's
0.5%.
173,000.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
So that's what we're asking
for the
them
town.
to, each of them to find in.
It's different for the schools. It'll be different for
Yeah.
the schools. The
Right,
school
because
is
the
at
school
60,
has-
you know,
Right.
at, well,
That's
Yeah.
how much we're
50.
asking each of the operating divisions to find in savings.
no, that would be just
Yeah.
for the town, because it's a different
No,
dollar
I
amount.
understand that.
Okay.
but
Yeah,
I'm
it'd be
saying-
173.
I understand that the
Yeah.
CPS number is different, but what I'm saying is this helps us understand what we're asking
Yeah.
the operating entities to do.
Right.
We're asking them to find this amount of savings in their preliminary budgets.
So if you go from original idea of 3.5 down to 3,
Yeah.
it's about 173,000 for the town and about 250 for CPS. Take it down another, now we're at 3%. Take it to 2.5, it's another 173, another,
And that ends up
250.
being,
that's,
we
But-
ta- and actually, that's a good point, Peggy, because I had 3%. I was thinking in the 3% range, because that's the number we focused on more, but they actually asked for 3.5 for CPS.
Yes.
So if we come in at
So we've
3,
taken
we're
two-
already asking them to cut
250.
out of their currently
Request.
anticipated budget.
Well, yeah, again, we're early in the process, so I don't know that they haven't done that sort of zero-based number yet. They're saying, yeah, we think it could be 3%, 3.5%. So I think it is good timing. I think with, what do we know? Well, we know that the schools will have, or all these entities will have that 3.06% inflation to wrestle with. And we know the schools have declining enrollment, which in the case of the high school is resulting, because the cost gets apportioned with Carlisle. Now, I want to just make the point, if there was no apportionment, there'd be no reduction. This is
Right.
only because somebody else
Heads
is.
up, because who knows what's going to happen next year?
It's going the other way.
It could go the other way. It's always a
Yeah, no, we're,
wild card.
Right, and my point is just that it isn't that the costs are dropping at CCRSD, it's just that our share is declining. So at the CPS at 3.5%, it would be above inflation, if you will, right? 3% would be more inflation normal. That would be no cuts per se, right, from an inflationary. Do the same thing you did last year, but it costs 3% more. That's how I view that. And to your earlier question, Lindsay, about productivity, I would think that it's awfully hard for the town staff to, other than the executive staff, to find, and in this case, in that case, it ends up being, we answered more emails because they're so, the asks and the wish list are unending. So they can't really reduce costs with that increase in productivity. But that said, that the schools, can only increase the classroom sizes, I guess.
And let's keep, and that 3% inflation figure,
Yeah.
the relevant, is the cost of, includes salaries as well as relevant goods.
It's 80% employment cost index, 20% goods.
All right, so that's the point, because they have, it's much, we will hear, if we come in underneath the asks, we will hear feedback, extensive feedback. And you can see where it is particularly difficult when you start getting into a situation where you can't make contracted for salary increases, you are cutting actual positions. That's much harder. Finding efficiencies in other ways is something that we should be encouraging them to do.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we discussed at length last year was keeping the tax increase under the 2.5 level. And so at 3%, I don't know whether we're going to achieve that.
We haven't, Don did the analysis differently this year, but as I understand it, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that was partly because we're not close to the 2.5%. We're not at risk.
Our trajectory
if we're in this
is
ballpark.
Okay.
Well, I did it differently this year because I've been repeatedly frustrated to go through these guidelines only to see the actual spending 2% higher than the guideline number. And I wanted to, as part of our charge, we're supposed to weigh in on all of these financial matters. So why aren't we weighing in on those that, as I said, I think a couple of meetings ago, what gets measured gets done. And this is a clear example of, well, if nobody's measuring the capital, then it's subject to guidelines. Yeah.
We really are not going to discuss capital anymore. It was a really useful discussion.
I'm just explaining.
And that is not the deliverable for this meeting. We have time to discuss capital. At subsequent meetings, we have an awareness, a heightened awareness of the impact that the capital expenditures are having on our total tax burden, and that's very useful. But let's focus on the task.
I was just saying I can't answer the question of what the change in spending will be. Yeah.
Which argues for being conservative. Which argues for being conservative in the way we set the guidelines until we can do
Set
that
them low.
part of the analysis. Yeah, I think it
Okay.
does. Yes, Eric?
I will withdraw my motion and let Eric make a motion. I can do that.
Okay. I will make a motion to set the guideline at 2.5% for the town, 2.5% for CPS, and negative 0.9% for CCRSD.
Second.
Further discussion? Are we ready for a vote on a 2.5% guideline? Clerk, call the roll.
You go last.
I get
Let's
to
do
go
reverse
last.
alphabetical.
Yeah, reverse alphabetical.
This is the roll call for the motion to set the preliminary guidelines for the town at 2.5%, for CPS at 2.5%, and for CCRSD at negative 0.9%. The roll call will now begin. Suresh Bhatia,
Yes.
Peggy Briggs,
Yes.
Brian Conway,
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
Pat Geyer, yes. Don Kupka,
Yes.
Lindsay List,
Yes.
Carlin Reed,
I'm sorry, but I think it's too low, so I'll have to vote no.
Shri Tupel,
Yes.
Lois Waska.
I'm voting with Carlin. I'm voting no. I think it's too low.
Okay. We have 2 noes, no abstain. 8 yeses. Motion passes.
We have established a preliminary guideline. I'm sure we'll be hearing from the town and the schools at our next meeting. Unless there is any further business, I will take as an action item to just email the Carlisle Finance Committee and let them know what we decided for preliminary guidelines. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everyone.